I learned that to be good at anything, it's going to take time. I just wasn't ready to go out at the pace I went out at. And I also learned that if you go out too hot, you pay for it tenfold later on in the race. There's a process to everything, and everything there's a journey. And, I hadn't gone through enough of the journey to be good enough at the sport yet to go out at the pace that I went out at. So, it taught me a lot of valuable lessons that day, but it also taught me that, I wanted to quit. I wanted to quit for mile 3 in the run on, but it taught me that you can do it. This is a privilege. Forced pain is a privilege. And, there's people out here in wheelchairs with no arms, no legs doing this. And fuck, if they can do it, I can do it. I'm just in pain, but I can do it. There's nothing holding me back.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. I hope you guys enjoyed the last episode. It was my first solo episode. I was a little nervous, but the feedback's been great, so I really, really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. Also, check out the show notes. I got discount codes for picking up copy of Audacious or Break Barriers. Today's guest is a guest I'm really excited about, and I joked around with him before we hopped on because for the last several years, anytime I hop on Instagram, I see his pretty face. So I feel very fortunate to have him on. Eric Hinman, he's a hybrid athlete, 5-time Ironman, serial entrepreneur, brand builder who specializes in scaling early stage consumer and wellness brands. Some of Eric's partners include 10,000, Slate, Ice Barreled, SISU, HVMN, Normal Brand, Blokes, MASA Chips, Kane, Flux, GORUCK, Creatures of Habit, and more. Many of these brands that you know, some of these brands you even heard from this podcast. So that's really exciting. Eric believes in the long-term vision of the brands he partners with. His portfolio of angel investments in the wellness space includes many of these companies, and I'm excited to dive in. Eric, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. How are you today?
Of course, man. The other thing we revealed before this show is we found out that we went to the same college. And for people who are listening, SUNY Geneseo is a really, really small school. And if you listen to the Jacob Zemer episode, and now Eric and Jason Tardik, a long time ago, actually, it's 3 Geneseo grads that have been on the show. So small world there.
It's so cool. Yeah, Geneseo honestly was my start with weightlifting. I did push-ups and just some bench press in high school. I think it was probably my last few months of high school when I got into weightlifting. And then I went to college having this newfound love for push-ups and bench press. And I started going to the Geneseo gym every day. And wow. I met this guy, Ian, who was absolutely jacked, massive shoulders and biceps, which are the 2 things I cared most about back then. And he saw me going into the gym and just doing bench press every single day. And he's like, is that all you do is bench press? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what else are you supposed to do? It's like, no, you do bis and tris one day, you do back one day, you do shoulders one day, never legs, never deadlift, never anything functional, but all of the aesthetic muscles. So I started working out with him for 4 years at Geneseo and ended up getting pretty muscular by the end of that 4-year tenure.
That's so funny. I kind of have a similar story, actually. When I was in Geneseo, I was friends with a lot of the soccer players there. And so whenever I got a chance to work out, I was generally going to the gym with them. And similar to you, the question they had asked me is all you do bench press? And that's because at that point, I didn't really know much better. Wow, that's a nice little full circle moment right there. And I mean, I don't know about it in 2002. I imagine it had to have been pretty similar. But when I was there, Geneseo was a pretty big party school at the time. Huge. I mean, they shut after 2009, they kind of like cleaned things up. They got rid of a lot of the bars over there. There was, a couple of incidents on campus. So I had to imagine, especially back in your day, it was probably a little bit difficult to kind of lean in and focus on fitness, unless you weren't playing a sport there, right?
I played 1 year of basketball. I think I
Okay.
played a total of maybe 35 seconds that entire season. So I basically just sat the bench all year. But yeah, my first year I played basketball. And then after that, I played intramural basketball, but it was mainly just weightlifting. And, I was going Monday through Thursday, and then, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there was no gym. I was sleeping in until 11 o'clock in the morning because I was so hungover.
Huh. Yeah, that sounds like it's on par with the Geneseo experience. Um, a couple of things. Let's give the audience just some quick context with regards to your background here. Did you grow up in the Syracuse area?
I did. I grew up in a really small town, Pulaski, New York. Um, I played three sports in high school: basketball. I ran cross country, ran track. My senior year, I played football, which broke my cross country coach's heart when I switched that year. I was a good runner. That was my strong point for sure. Basketball was my favorite sport. And then went to Geneseo, 4 years at Geneseo, studied business management. And after that, I started my first career, which was property and casualty insurance. I moved to Oswego, New York for 1 year, and then Syracuse, New York, and lived in Syracuse, New York from 2003 until 2017. And for 7 years, I was building an insurance agency, property and casualty insurance. So driving 50,000 miles a year, going door to door, selling insurance, mainly to campgrounds and marinas. Those were my two niches. And then in 2010, I co-founded a software company with a business partner building mobile applications. Did that for 4 years, built that to about a company of 20 people. And then got into Ironman in 2010, did that from 2010 to 2014, which is where I started building a following on social media. Unbeknownst to me, it would turn into, a business later on. 2013 opened a CrossFit gym in Syracuse, New York, and 2016 through 2019 opened up a series of healthy fast casual restaurants. One called Original Grain, one called Exo Taco.
So, two things stand out to me. It's clear you've been an athlete from the beginning, but also your business acumen stands out here, right? Like you did a lot in a very quick period of time post college. Where did all this come from? Can you share some background there with regards to, was it your parents that were always like prioritizing fitness in your life? Did they have any influence with regards to the businessman that you are today?
My parents definitely had a lot of influence on both of those aspects. My mom was a cheerleader. My dad played baseball. Neither were like high level athletes by any means, but they were always so supportive of me, and still to this day are my biggest fans. And anything I still continue to do in my 40s. So they would come to all my track meets, cross country meets, all of my basketball games, little league practice, senior league practice. Super supportive. And then my dad ran an insurance company, so I watched him lead people from a young age. And my mom was a school teacher, but in my more formative years, so early teens and teens, she was writing grants for the school that she was a teacher at, and just, worked really hard. So, I got to see both of them work hard, and I got to see my dad, leading a company. Um, During the summers when I was in high school, I would work for my dad in the insurance business. And then I also worked for a couple other entrepreneurs that were in my small town of Pulaski, New York. I shoveled roofs to make money for spring break in
Hmm.
college, shoveled driveways. So I was pretty
All over.
entrepreneurial, even in high school and in college.
So, that being said, though, there is definitely a huge difference between building a property and casualty insurance business and doing what you do now. I have to imagine that you're having a lot more fun now. But were there any elements to the early stages of your career that have influenced how you go about your business today?
Definitely. I mean, daily execution and the compounding consistencies and how that mounts over time to build something. I learned a lot of that in those early years. Going door to door selling insurance at 21 years old, you develop a tough skin, and you also develop, people skills, and you understand the importance of relationships and customer service. So I think those first 7 years taught me so much about that. Under promise and over deliver is what it taught me during that time period. And I loved always being, always defining my destiny. I think that's what I really enjoyed when I got into triathlon was like just purposeful practice every single day. And if you do that for long enough, you're going to be successful in it. And building businesses, kind of the same thing. It's just purposeful practice every single day, and making sure that what you're doing each day aligns with where you want to be down the road. So yeah, all of those things certainly aided in where I am now. The social media is so interesting, and how this has become so much of our resume. When you and I were in college, like, we literally had to write up a resume to get a job. And now for me, I mean, social media has become my reputation, my brand, my resume. Gets me in the door at places. It allows me to occupy this small fragment in so many people's minds. Like what you said, when you open up Instagram, you saw my face for years. So, I mean, that opportunity of building a personal brand and how far that can carry you and how it scales is just so incredible compared to, what it was for me back in the early 2000s of, trying to reach out to people and trying to be in front of people.
There's something unique about you, and I promise you I'm not saying this to pump your tires, although you deserve to have your tires pumped. But the one thing that's unique about you is every time I see you on the gram, I see you with different brands. And I see you with products that do make sense for the brand that you're building, which I feel like a lot of other people in your space fail to do. A lot of times it comes off unnatural for other people. And you've got, a unique gift in either finding the brands that really align with you and working with them, or just being agile when it comes to your own ambitions, your own hobbies, where a lot of these brands just naturally fit the mold for you. And I want to ask if that's intentional, or if it just kind of worked out that way. I mean, like, thinking about it, really, over the years, like, I've seen you with a lot of the brands that I named up front, but none of them I'm like, this guy again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's become very intentional. I mean, early on, I mean, it was just trading, let's say a bike at cost in exchange for promotion, or a pair of sunglasses in exchange for promotion. And oftentimes I was just trying to add a lot of value before ever asking for anything. And over the years, I've realized, A, who I enjoy working with the most, and B, where I can add the most value. And that's early stage companies. I really enjoy working with companies I perceive to be the latest and greatest. I like working with up and coming brands, up and coming entrepreneurs, kind of the new, my perceived cool kids. So that's really where I specialize now, because that's what I like. I've always been a whore for good branding. I've always been a guy, buying the new
Yeah,
cool products. I
I hear
like
you there.
brand. I like technology. I like new things. And I also have realized that that's where my skill set is best served, is early stage. I've never been a part of a big company. I've never grown a massive company. I've always been involved in, kind of smaller startup companies. And I understand, how to build awareness early on. So ultimately, I want to feel like I'm providing a ton of value with anyone that I work with, and I want to be friends with the people I'm working with. Over are the days where I separate business and pleasure. Now I just like it to be a lifestyle. So, that's why I work with the brands and the people I work with, is because I want them to come over and sauna when they're in town, and I want to talk to them on the phone on a regular basis. I want to see them win.
Yeah, I mean, look, the videos that I've been seeing online of the boys coming out there training with you, doing the cold plunges, getting in the sauna, like, you've built it seems like you just built an open house for the people that you believe in, and that's really, really special. And I think that is also part of the draw to someone that doesn't know you, because it's very real. It's not a commercial. It's like, this is the way that I live, and these are the people that I want to surround myself by, and this is how much fun we're having doing it at the same time.
Yep.
And you do a really, really good job of that.
Thank you.
Uh, you got it. All right. So tell me now. Tell me about where you started with the world of Ironman, because that was your first kind of jump post college into the world of competitive endurance sports.
No, there was a period of time where I was just going to the gym for 30 minutes 3 times a week, and just getting in a pump sesh, and still partying hard on the weekends, not eating healthy. So from 21 until 27, I started to get pretty out of shape by my late 20s. Sitting in a car, driving a lot of miles every single year. I thought Subway was my healthiest option when I was on the road, getting a sub. So I just didn't have an education around what it meant to live a healthy lifestyle. So 2007, when I was 27 years old, I hired a personal trainer to help get me back into aesthetically good looking shape. I committed to 5 days a week, 30-minute sessions with him. And he had me doing functional lifts with my heart rate elevated, meaning I would be doing like deadlifts, thrusters, back squats. And in between a lot of the sets, I would be running around a track. So, kind of CrossFit before I knew what CrossFit was. And then a CrossFit gym opened in my neighborhood, and I joined that CrossFit gym and just really got addicted to CrossFit. And I started running again. I bought a bike. I started cycling. Through cycling, I met a bunch of people who were doing a half Ironman that was coming to Syracuse. And they told me the distances. And I was like, you guys are doing that in a day? And they're like, yeah, people do it in 4 hours. I'm like, that sounds crazy. But I was really intrigued. So I joined a triathlon club. I had no formal background in swimming other than I grew up on Lake Ontario, so I could doggy paddle, but I couldn't swim with my head in the water. So I joined a local gym, started swimming every single day. And I would go to these Wednesday night triathlons in Jamesville, New York. And I really got addicted to it. I thought it was so much fun. It was so hard, but I also was seeing so much progress every single time I did one of these little sprint distance triathlons. So that was 2009 when I started doing triathlon. And, I was also personal training. So at this point, I'm starting to get pretty fit again. And in 2010, I did my first half Ironman. And we both share this, that our first half Ironman was Eagle Man, which is in Cambridge, Maryland. And, my day there, it was like 95 degrees, humid. It's in June, just brutal race conditions. And I had these lofty goals in my head that I was going to get one of the two qualifying slots for Kona in my age group at that race. It's 20, 29, maybe I was in the 30-year-old age group, 30 to 34 in 2010 when I did it. So in the swim, it was a no wetsuit swim because the water is so warm there. And swimming, has always been my weakness in triathlon. So the swim took me like 45 minutes, which a good swim time would be sub 30 minutes in a half Ironman. So already 15 minutes behind like anyone who's going to be qualifying for Kona. So the bike I picked up pretty quick, and I became a decent cyclist, within a year of doing it. So I go out pretty hard on the bike, and the bike and a half Ironman is 56 miles. I want to say my bike time there was like 230, 240, which I had no business riding that fast and then being able to run a half marathon afterwards. So I'll get off the bike. I'm pretty cooked, and I go out on the run. The first mile is like a 650. The second mile is like a 720. The third mile is like an 845. The fourth mile, I'm walking. And the last 6 miles, I basically just walked in. I was nowhere close to getting a Kona slot. I think my time was 5:13. I was hoping to go like 4:20, 4:30. And oh man, I had to stand under a fire hose for like 30 minutes after that race, cooling down. I was so out of it. And I told everyone I was with in that moment, I'm never doing this again. That was horrible. And then an hour later, I'm back at our Airbnb signing up for Ironman Lake Placid the next year.
Jesus. Jeez. What did you learn the most from that experience?
uh, Pace yourself. I learned that to be good at anything, it's going to take time. I just wasn't ready to go out at the pace I went out at. And I also learned that if you go out too hot, you pay for it tenfold later on in the race. There's a process to everything, and everything there's a journey. And, I hadn't gone through enough of the journey to be good enough at the sport yet to go out at the pace that I went out at. So, yeah, it taught me a lot of valuable lessons that day, but it also taught me that, I wanted to quit. I wanted to quit for mile 3 in the run on, but it taught me that like, you can do it. Like, this is a privilege. Forced pain is a privilege. And, there's people out here in wheelchairs with no arms, no legs doing this. And fuck, if they can do it, I can do it. Like, I'm just in pain, but I can do it. There's nothing holding me back. So yeah, it taught me not to give up. It taught me to finish. I had another race similar to that my first year in Kona at the Ironman World Championships, where my stomach was just off the entire day from the start of the swim on, and from like mile 10 on the bike, for 6 hours, 7 hours, I wanted to quit at that race. But I didn't, because again, I'm like, this is a privilege. I am out here racing amongst the best in the world. What a cool opportunity. I'm getting my medal. I'm getting my finisher's tee. Like, I'll figure out how to make it through this. And, disappointed for sure, but also like satisfied that I did it. I didn't quit, because that's the worst feeling in the world. When you do something, when you commit to doing something and you know that you could have done it, but you don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of the material that you post, I've noticed you do reflect back on who you were at. I don't know if it was your older 20s, younger 30s versus where you are now. You're in your young 40s, right? You're 43, 44 right now?
Yep, 44.
You're 44 right now. And you put a lot of side by side pictures, and you weren't necessarily like wildly out of shape, but something tells me, there may have been a lack of discipline or priorities needed to be aligned. Can you speak to that and your angle with that these days with regards to the message that you're trying to put out there?
Yeah, I think the message is compounding consistencies and how they can take you down two very different paths. So, my compounding consistencies from 21 until 27 were, going out late at night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, having at least 10 drinks each of those nights, eating Subway and pasta and Egg McMuffins, just no real discipline, no real education around how I was living my life and the effects it was going to have over that 6 year period. And then fast forward to 28 years old to 34 years old, another 6 year period. I went from being this out of shape insurance salesman to competing at the Ironman World Championships. And it was because then I was doing 2 to 3 workouts a day. I was doing recovery protocols. I was sitting in saunas. I was getting at least 8 hours of sleep, all of these other compounding consistencies that took me in a very different direction over a 6 year period. So yeah, that's the message. And I get a lot of pushback from people that, you don't have kids, like, you train so much, like, how could any normal person do this? And I'm not telling you have to live my life the way I live my life. I'm just saying that be cognizant of, are your daily decisions and compounding consistencies taking you in the direction that you want to go in?
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think that's, an excellent thing for people to reflect on right there. And it's not just that. I mean, you've done things like you've changed your environment. I don't know if it was intentional or non-intentional, but that's another thing that I want to kind of dive into is what spurred the move from Western New York to Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, my lifestyle had changed, my interests had changed. Yeah, I wasn't running businesses in Syracuse, New York anymore, so I didn't have this reason to be there other than my family was there. And when I went to Colorado for the first time in 2017, I just fell in love with the lifestyle, the sun being out all the time, the ease of being out in nature, everyone there seemingly biking and running and just doing active things. And Syracuse, New York is not that way. People kind of live and die by sports and business. And, it's very much a, blue collar working city. So being here, seeing how people were very lifestyle based in Colorado really drew me to want to be in a place that was more lifestyle based. So yeah, I mean, I made a hard decision of leaving my friends, leaving what appeared to be this amazing life in Syracuse, New York, to kind of start all over again in Colorado. And it's one of the best decisions I've made in life, because you're right, your environment heavily dictates your reality. It's going to dictate the people that you're around, what the environment begs you to do each day, whether it's, go out and party in a indoor entertainment based city where the weather isn't all that great, to a place like Colorado where the sun is just constantly shining. And I'm looking out at the mountains right now and they're just begging me to go out mountain biking this afternoon. And my whole friend group is like, hey, do you want to go hiking this weekend? Do you want to go on a paddleboarding expedition? It's all fitness based. So yeah, I switched my reality. I switched my environment, and that massively changed what my reality looks like each day.
What did it do for you mentally? I mean, it doesn't sound like you were necessarily in a dark place in Syracuse. So I don't think it's that drastic, but I do feel like there might be a lot of people listening to this show who are considering transitioning out of their environment because they know there could be something brighter on the other side. And while I do feel like that impact physically is going to come along at some point once you put yourself in those environments. I think what people are really striving for is also, the mental impact of moving to those environments. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Agree. I mean, I think they're linked. I mean, that's so much of why I do so many of the physical things I do is because it makes me feel good mentally and emotionally. I have tremendous energy after all of these activities I do. I have a great emotional well-being, mental clarity to feel like I'm on when I'm speaking to others and to be present with other people. So yeah, I mean, the physical side of what I get to do now definitely has positively affected the emotional and mental side of my well being. Um, and I mean, just the people that you're around, that's going to affect, your positivity, your energy levels so much. Like I'm around other people who want to be here. Most people in Colorado, they're transplants. Many of them are transplants. They moved here for a reason because they wanted to recreate in nature. And that's a very different vibe than a city where people were born and raised there, kind of stuck there with career, family. So, that's going to either weigh on you positively or negatively. And it's weighed on me positively here, where I'm just around all of these really positive people I found my tribe. Like I found the people that are doing the exact things that I want to do each day.
Yeah. No, it's really evident and it's really cool. And I think that what you're doing is you're paving a path and showing other people, like it's possible. The first couple steps are probably the hardest, as is the case with anything that you want to accomplish. Now that you're out there, it's really, really prevalent with regards to what it is that you're building. So now I want to get back into the business side of things with regards to the platform that you've been building and cultivating over the last couple of years. Talk to me about some of the ups and downs over there. Obviously, we all know Instagram's a highlight reel. We see a lot of the good things. We know where you came from based on what you shared with regards to your professional trajectory. But I do feel like just the overall world of social media is just an ever evolving game. And you're doing a really good job staying on top of it. But why don't you talk to us about some of the challenges that you've been facing?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed so much over the years. I mean, when I started Instagram back in 2010, it was to share photos with my friends. There was no thought about building a brand on it. There was no thought about monetizing it. There was no thought about video. There was no thought about like really sharing my story and my journey and impacting others. It was really just, hey, here's a cool new bike I just got. Here's a cool view. Here's the run I just went on. There wasn't a lot of thought that went into it. And as my following grew, I started to recognize that people were really inspired by Ironman. They were really inspired by my training and how I was balancing that with, running multiple businesses at the time. But it was still very photo based. And you're right, it was still very kind of highlight reel based. And then the last 4 or 5 years, as I've realized that I've become more of a brand, and there's all of these people that don't know me that follow me. That
Yeah.
for the first 7 years, it was mainly people that knew me or knew a bit about me. Now, the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, many of my followers have come from, let's say, one post that popped up on their feed through the explore page. And it's probably a journey post where they see what I looked like when I was 28 and they see what I look like now, and they followed me from that post and they know nothing about my story. They just know that one post
Yeah.
and whatever caption it was I wrote on that post. And like catering to that audience is vastly different than sharing something with my close friends. So I've had to really rethink like what content to put out there based on how my audience has changed and like how I can impact them positively and how to share that story. And obviously, all of social media has become more and more video based. So it's how do I tell this story in 45 seconds? And how do I appease Instagram's algorithm knowing that the first second is the most important part of it, whether or not someone is going to watch it, engage with it, or they're just going to keep scrolling to the next one. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more thought that has to go into content now to appease your audience, to grow your audience, and to appease the algorithms of all these social media platforms. And now I'm starting to do more YouTube. So YouTube is kind of a whole nother beast. I'm actually more excited now, honestly, about YouTube than I am Instagram, just because with YouTube, it can be more just like raw in the a 45-minute video is vastly different than 30 seconds. So in 45 minutes, like I can just be me and, I have someone who comes and can shoot and edit that all together, but it's just the conversations I'm having. It's what I'm thinking in the moment, what I'm doing in the moment. It doesn't have to be, condensed into this short, captivating video. So I'm excited about YouTube. And I think more and more is going to move towards, longer form videos as, TikTok, Instagram become more and more people just trying to create something viral.
I agree. I think we're moving in that direction as well. Hey, Mile 40 fam. I get asked a lot about my training programs and how I set myself up for success to cross finish lines all over the world. Well, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Recovery is half the battle. And in order to get that recovery, I rely on clean sources of protein. That's why my go-to protein shake is OWYN. Only what you need. I have one after every single workout. 100% vegan and plant-based, OWYN's plant-based shakes use a multi-source protein blend of pea, pumpkin seed, and flax seeds to include all essential amino acids to promote optimal daily health. Uncompromised taste. OWYN brings together the essential elements of advanced nutrition, amazingly clean ingredients, functional superiority, and uncompromised taste. Now go ahead, go to www.liveowyn.com. That's spelled LIVEOWYN.com. Use code MILE40 for 20% off your next purchase. Only what you need. You brought up an interesting point around content for your friends versus content for, the people that don't know you or that you don't know directly. And this is something that, I had to kind of work through over the years. Was I realized that the people that are probably the most critical of any content I put out there were the people that knew me, in one degree, and the people who were actually following for the content were the people that I didn't know, and the people that were getting the most out of it, and saw the value of it were the people that again I had no idea who they were. They were the random people who were in the DMs. Talk to me if you ever had to kind of work around that or understand that at some point, because that was something that I would say personally was a realization that took me a while to get to.
It definitely did. Yeah. I mean, the last 4 years for me have been much more about, posting as a brand than posting as a human. Posting just what I'm doing today versus posting something that I know is impactful. The journey post specifically, like that's not something I would post for my friends. My
Sure.
friends know me. They know my journey. Like they don't care. But someone who doesn't know me, like they're going to be able to take a lot away from that. And, it's going to really impact them. And also, I mean, the social media algorithm is going to favor first impressions. And, that's obviously a major first impression. If you see a photo of someone much younger and they don't look nearly as good as they do when they're older. So, I recognize that opportunity of using that to grow my audience. And I mean, over the years, my brand has changed so much. When I first started Instagram, it was all about triathlon because that's the chapter of life I was living. And then in 2014, I did my last Ironman, and then I shifted more towards CrossFit, but I wasn't nearly as elite at CrossFit as I was at Ironman. So I didn't really feel like I had the authority to, speak to people in CrossFit lingo. So I was kind of lost from 2015 to 2017 of like, what is my brand now if I'm not an elite Ironman athlete anymore and I'm not an elite CrossFit athlete, just a guy who works out a lot? Why would anyone care about that? But I recognized then that people were really interested in my lifestyle. Like, how do you have so much time and flexibility to do what you want every day? When I moved to Colorado in 2017, I mean, most days I literally was just out exploring. I was rock climbing and trail running and mountain biking. I wasn't working nearly as much as I am now. I was just like enjoying Colorado for a couple years. So that intrigued people of like, how did you create this flexible lifestyle to be able to do this in your 30s? So, then I started shifting my content more towards that. And the last 4 years, I've recognized that like my journey is what's most interesting about me in the moment. So that's what I'm sharing a lot of content around, is just my journey and how I went from where I was in my 20s to where I am now in my 40s. And only I can tell that story. I feel like stories, do the best on social media because only you have your story. So I think about that whenever I'm posting something. Like if I start to post something that I feel is not preachy, but just like sharing something that isn't story based, I revert it back to a story. I'm like, I'm going to tell a story because no one else has this exact same story I have.
I agree. And I think that's what's resonating, ultimately. And just another key differentiator. When you look back at, some of those older pictures versus now, and you talk about, your regimen all the time. You talk about, I was actually on your page earlier today. You talk about how frequently you're out on the bike. You talk about how often you're lifting. You talk about how often you're doing aerobic exercises. Talk to us a little bit about your relationship with nutrition and alcohol. Obviously, we know that you're on top of it. Maybe just for the audience to have some insight here, talk to us about how you're taking care of yourself from a nutrition perspective.
Sure. So, I mean, exercise for me is dialed in and has been dialed in for 15, 16 years. So, that is the primary contributor of, why I look and function the way I do at the moment. I mean, diet is certainly pretty dialed in, but, do I have dessert? Do I have sugar here and there? Definitely. I'm not as strict about diet as I am about getting, at least one and most times two workouts in each day. And then I'm also really dialed in with recovery. I do contrast therapy every single night, going from a hot sauna into the ice barrel, 3 rounds of that. And that obviously helps allow me to, train the high volume each day in and day out. So yeah, training first. I would say sleep is probably the second thing I have dialed in the most, recovery third, and then diet would be the fourth. Diet, the key is like putting it on autopilot, making sure that you're having similar things sourced from nature each day, at similar times. That's what I do. I don't have to make that many decisions around eating. I'm not going out to eat very often. Maybe twice a week I'll go out to dinner, but most meals, we're making here at the house. And, I found those foods that I really enjoy. Again, that you can find in nature. Obviously, it's not rocket science, like what we were meant to consume and what we were meant not to consume. And I enjoy it every single day. So I'm generally having smoothies throughout the day or eggs, fruit, and honey. And then at night, I usually have about a pound of meat and then some kind of carb and a side of vegetables. Pretty basic. But again, I'm like stoked about that day in and day out of having those routine foods. Yeah, that's really
To that point, a lot of people sometimes need to be reminded that simplicity is the key when it comes to a lot of the success that athletes, or not even athletes, I'd say some of the happiest individuals are really simple in nature. That idea of being okay with doing the same thing over and over and over again, and kind of refining that. I think that's one of the things that, is a parallel across the board with a lot of the high performers that we've had on this show. There's no specific cheat code, if you will. There is just, finding the formula and repeating it over and over again.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things that I hear from you.
Michael Chernow, who you've had on the podcast, Creatures of Habit. Obviously, he's wired like that. I love this story. Jesse Itzler told it. David Goggins was with him at New Year's one year, and everyone was going around stating their New Year's resolution and like what they wanted more of or to do in the new year. And it got to David, and he goes, "I don't want anything. I don't want anything more. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing right now, but better." And I really feel like that is the key to success. Is again the compounding consistency of like picking a few things and doing those things really well and just getting a little bit better at them. I mean, I've been doing CrossFit now since 2009 is when I took my first class. So, we're 16 years in and I'm just scratching the just scratching the surface of getting to the CrossFit games in my age group. Mountain biking, I've been doing for 5 years now, and I'm just starting to post some really good times when I do Leadville each year. So, but those are the things I do. I'm generally not doing anything other than those two things. I'll trail run here and there, but I also had to give up a lot of the running to get better at CrossFit, to get stronger in CrossFit. So, yeah, it's really like narrowing your aperture and focusing on a few things and recognizing that, we're all going to write multiple chapters in life, but focus on one chapter at a time. I think that's the best way to do it.
When did you make that decision to let go of some of the running to focus more on CrossFit? And I'm asking this question for personal reasons. Reason
Yeah.
being, I've been in the marathon game now for a long time. I'll finish up my 6th World Major in March, and at that point, I'll have 12 marathons. And I am thinking about kind of pivoting after that and focusing more on strength. And I do feel a little hesitant because for the last 7 years now, I've identified as a runner. And it feels strange to me not to identify as a runner. I don't know if it was the same for you when you made that decision, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, I think the biggest thing is fearing being a beginner again, A, and B, fearing that you're going to lose everything that you built up to. And I've now kind of ebbed and flowed enough between strength, aerobic capacity, endurance, to know that once you build to a certain level, it's much easier to get back to it. So I now know that if I don't run for 6 months, but I want to do a high rocks or I want to do a half marathon, if I focus for 3 months on running, I can get back to a pretty good place in running. And I've done it enough not to be scared of losing it and then gaining it back. And, I've, I've, uh, I've started over several times now. I went from elite Ironman athlete to kind of beginner CrossFit athlete and have now built CrossFit athlete up. So, I recognize that if you want to be good at something, it's probably going to take 4 or 5 years, and I'm okay designating 4 or 5 years to doing it. For me, though, the main decision to get more into CrossFit was just how I felt. I was starting to feel really banged up from the high volume of running. I was running 50, 60 miles a week in the Ironman years in my bigger build months or bigger build weeks and months. And my body just didn't feel good. Like it hurt to go up and down stairs. I was sitting at high tops whenever I would go out to a restaurant because my lower back hurt so much if I sat in a regular chair. And I'm just like, damn, I don't feel good. And I wasn't looking forward to the runs anymore. Like 85% of the runs, I was like, all right, got to do this hour run today at this heart rate. I didn't feel like doing it. But yet when I was doing CrossFit, I enjoyed it and my body felt good. So I'm like, why don't I do more of this where I feel good every single day and less of this where I just don't feel that great anymore? And, I have a lot of friends now who've moved away from the powerlifting and strength training because they did that in their 20s and 30s into endurance, and they feel great doing endurance now. So, I think it's just where you are in life and maybe what you've overused and then complementing it with something that has been underused.
That's fair. What are some of the key, I don't know if mistake is the right word, but let's go with the word mistake. What are some of the key mistakes that you see hybrid athletes making with regards to maintaining that hybrid designation, if you will? I feel like the word hybrid athlete has really come up a lot over the last couple of years in particular.
Yeah.
And I understand it. I think a lot of us want to be hybrid athletes, but there's no one, there's a lot of people that we look up to and say, like, this is who I want to be, but there is actually no, like it's a designation that we made up essentially. So speak to me a little bit about like some of the mistakes that you see people making along the way.
I mean, I think one of the big mistakes is, if you're truly hybrid, then, you're probably not going to be able to take anything to an elite level. For example, in the Ironman years, I had to give up my weight training. I had to get down into the 160s to get to Kona. If I had stayed in the 180s and I had stayed doing CrossFit 5 days a week, it would have been unlikely to get to Kona. Could I have done some Ironmans with decent times? For sure. But to be exceptional at it, like you generally have to give something up. And the same with CrossFit now. I've had to give up a lot of the running because I just wasn't strong enough in CrossFit with, running 30 plus miles a week. I can run 15 miles per week and still maintain my strength. So, I'll do that. So it's just understanding that there will be a trade-off depending on how far you want to take one or the other. But I do believe that, hybrid training, being balanced, is that's how I feel my best. Like, I feel damn good if I'm in the gym 60 to 80 minutes, 5 days a week. And then if I'm mountain biking 60 to 80 minutes, 5 or 6 days a week. And you don't have to do that much. I'm doing that because I love it. My life's built around it. My businesses are built around it. And I still have ambitions of competing at a high amateur level. But yeah, I mean, being multifaceted, I think you feel your best, having come from doing a lot of things, to the extreme. If you're a good runner and you're running 100 miles a week, generally that's all you're going to be really good at. You're probably not going to have much strength. You're probably not going to have a lot of anaerobic capacity. You're going to have a lot of durability and you're going to be a very good runner. But most of my friends that run that type of volume, they end up injured and they end up, pretty banged up from it. So, I think having some combination of lifting, anaerobic training, aerobic training in your routine is where you're going to feel your best, as just well-rounded. And then you can also throw your head in the ring with, let's say, 3 or 4 months of specific training for anything. So I think that's another thing, is like recognizing that training hybrid, it allows you to then specialize for 3 or 4 months. Like, look at what Nick Bear has done.
Yep.
He'll dedicate 3 or 4 months.
Another animal. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll dedicate 3 or 4 months to training to do a sub 240 marathon, or he'll designate 3 or 4 months to go and do high rocks. But he has that, base, but then he does focus. He's not right now running, 25 miles. He's not trying to prepare for Leadville and prepare for high rocks. Like, those are two different chapters. So I think it's recognizing if you're going to do an extreme in something, it is going to require you to focus more and probably give up some to get to that place of extreme.
Agreed. Eric, this has been so insightful. So, you've really shared a lot and left us with a lot to reflect on. And I could sit here for days geeking out on this stuff, because there are a few people who live it the way that you've lived it. And so you're not speaking from textbooks as much as you're speaking from lived experience. And that goes a long, long way. To close things out here, when you look back at your entire body of work, right, and you look back on your career, the learnings, when you look at the progression of your social life, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. Like, I went to school up there, you went to school up there. It was a huge party scene. I've looked at the pictures that you've posted, 28 versus 43, 44. It's a huge shift. Like, I've myself have kind of gone through it. I stopped drinking 2 years ago. And that was a big decision on my part, not because of any reason, but because I wanted to be, the highest performing individual. Actually, I'll bring it back. It was Michael Chernow's episode that kind of pushed me to do it. And he didn't even, know that he was doing it, but he was talking about his own experience, and how he's been sober, and how, he looks to be the highest performer in every element of his life, whether it's being a parent, being a husband, so on and so forth. And it kind of clicked with me, like, I want to be the highest performer in every element of my life. So I just stopped drinking, and that was it. Just flipped the switch, essentially. And so all this to kind of round out, when you look at that entire body of work, and now that you have this incredible following of people all over the world, probably, what is it in terms of the message that you want to put out there, that means the most to you, for the people who are going to be following along, from here on out?
I mean, I think the moniker I live by, movement is medicine, making that correlation of movement and mental well-being, emotional well-being, energy, becoming the best version of yourself, and then attracting amazing people and amazing opportunities into your life. That is probably the message that I would want people to recognize the most, because, early on, I thought that exercise was just correlated to physical performance and a physical aesthetic. I didn't make the correlation between all of the other things that movement helps with. And, that's why I live my life by that moniker of movement is medicine.
I love it. Thank you for not preaching it, but for living it. That speaks volumes about you. That speaks volumes about the platform that you're building. And that says, everything that we need to know about why you are where you are today, and why you're only going to continue to succeed from here. So appreciate it, my man.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.